Greetings, readers and friends. Harvey Michaels here. I'm thrilled to welcome you to our adventure into Danshui President Plunge, Book 1, Evacuate or Pay. It was an electrifying story to write, and I can't wait to share some with you today. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Your support means the world to me. Thank you kindly. Okay, here we go. Chapter 5, A Carpet of Fireworks. Port Police HQ. Chief Pan, you'd better come look at the back wall. The junior officer arm shakes, jabbing at the small window. What is it? What's up? He asks, moving straight there for the first time without picking up his coffee mug. I'm not sure, but there are maybe some lights from under the water? What is that? He loudly asks no one, grasping for the binoculars. It looks like it could be a vehicle. What is that? His whole body jolts upright when he processes the obvious. The square of yellow curtains behind the lighted mannequins is gone. One knee buckles, and he stumbles forward as he realizes a shiny metal ramp is set up to the seawall. The black sky is unleashing white hell directly toward them. Super typhoon winds pummel the windows, and a squall of sideways rain briefly blinds them from further observing the ramp less than 100 meters away. Get Central PD on the phone. Note the time in our log. We don't know what it is yet, but they need to hear this right away. The chief's training makes him calm, rising to the emergency task, but his insides go cold, thinking of what might have happened and the watery grave he knows he must be looking at. Fisherman's Wharf Hotel. At first, Bernard was determined to keep going with lunch, fuming inwardly at the loss of control at the conference. Consensus about the choice of meeting place was already tenuous, and they were halfway through lunch. They should finish the meal first. After all, everyone saw Sanbao wave them off, saying that it was not important. But now, 15 minutes passed. The hotel staff informed them he drove off, and his father still hasn't returned or telephoned. What irritation there was vanished, and a spiking fear took its place. President Wang Sanbao, leaving the hotel in the Peking super typhoon, unleashed another storm indoors. Everyone came together behind the dining tables in the second-floor conference room, letting out pent-up angst, animatedly talking about what happened. Sanbao just walked out in the company of that stunning and bizarre female. Executives pepper Bernard Wang with questions. What was that about? What do we know? Is everything all right? How could he leave? Should we call someone? Who can we ask? This top echelon of Wang family enterprises mills around at the back of the conference room. Tenor and bass sounds of their intense murmurs rise to harmonize with the alto and soprano of the howling storm. Sanbao wasn't himself with that blonde-haired girl. He never stops moving around, but he froze standing next to her. She was wearing a bad wig. Her Rolex was such a fake. Who wears clothes like those? Bernard, profusely sweating and trembling, is with a dozen others in the lobby grilling the hotel staff. They fight to ignore the even louder shrieking sounds the wind makes and the nonstop concussive pounding on the first-floor windows. At the base of the stairs, a man and a woman disintegrate together, holding forearms, their panicked and mournful crying mostly drowned out by unnerving typhoon screams. Colleagues cast understanding sideways glances. They are surrounded by glass in the smallish lobby, deafened by the biggest typhoon ever to hit Taipei, now peaking, as they stand around helplessly asking what on earth could make an 82-year-old billionaire run off in the middle of it. They quickly find out he left with his normal security escort team and with the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, ivory-skinned girl everyone saw. What else did you see? Was anything else different? A gray-haired, agitated executive pumps the manager and other staff for details. Yes. They pulled into the driveway from the wrong direction, so we couldn't see inside the long van when the side door opened. Then his eyes flashed in remembrance. And the girl came 5 minutes earlier in a taxi. The license plate number will be on our security video. They all take out phones to start calling and realize they do not really know who to call. As panic rises around them, a foursome of calmer executives huddle and call Taipei Central Police Headquarters, asking on noisy speakerphone for the highest-ranking official overseeing Wang Sanbao's security detail. Central PD puts Colonel Han, Typhoon Crisis Center commander, on the phone. The calling group insists Central PD find out the status with the van, the security detail, and with President Wang Sanbao. They also insist this does not get out to any press. You must keep a lid on this story while we don't know what's happening. Don't worry about leaking, Colonel Han assures them. We will do everything we can immediately and keep this from any media. Overwrought, Bernard pulls it together enough to call his mother, Sanbao's wife. For the first time he can remember, there is no answer. Central PD. Colonel Han orders the driver and bodyguard's cell phone numbers called, both going straight to voicemail. Then they call the driver's house and also get no answer. Finally, they try the bodyguard's house. Hello? This is the Yang residence. Who are you looking for? The bodyguard's elder daughter, Ping Ping, answers their phone. Taipei Central PD here. Is this Mrs. Yang, James Yang's wife? No, this is his daughter. My mother is at Brenda Ping's house. We have been expecting her home for over an hour. She doesn't answer her phone. Is there anything wrong? She feels a knot of panic surge up inside her stomach. Please stay inside until we notify you, Miss Yang. It might be nothing, but we have to be careful. Colonel Han covers his phone and shouts out to the officers in the room. Prepare a SWAT team to the driver's house. Now, approach with extreme caution. Repeat, we may have a hostage situation. Go, make it happen. James and Theo. Friday morning, James and Theo were the only ones in the Central Police lounge above the carpool. Because their billionaire charge was technically working, his security detail had to be in position to support him in case he needed help. Theo, average height and weight, but decidedly more athletic since he began working with James, sat in a wooden easy chair near his upside-down partner. Shoeless feet soundlessly slid up and down against the wall as James completed 50 military push-ups. A scar under his chin since childhood reddened from upside-down blood pressure. Theo almost commented on James's necktie tapping his nose, but didn't feel like bantering. It's not that I'm worried or anything. You just want to be there, James grunted. Brenda lined me, and she sounded irritable. Echoing your mood back, James thought. She needs to hear that everything is going to be all right, and how much and why you are looking forward to your next quality time as a family, and the next time just for you and her. James's throaty voice, speaking phrases as he loudly breathed, held Theo's attention. Hey, that's pretty good, partner. I'm going to line her once I figure the best words to use. Theo's mood improved with the project to construct a loving word for his wife, something he had been working on and working on not sounding like he had been working on. "That's right. Serve it up carefully and slowly," James began. "Yeah, like a fine meal," Theo finished. They had this conversation before. Earlier that morning, the two men read a part of Scripture and discussed it. Theo claimed officially he was a Christian for years, but when he and James first started talking about God, Theo realized he never really was. After their first half year together, Theo converted for real. Day after day, he saw James's example, his consistent, caring ways, how James's rock-hard muscles contrasted with his gentle voice and demeanor. Theo trusted James and confided his lack of confidence as a parent and a husband with James. James listened and sometimes gave advice, but just as often asked Theo, "What do you think?" and listened more. James's modest, disciplined attitude was encapsulated in the motto he repeated whenever walking upside down in place: "Just keep going." To Theo, James was in every way closer than a blood brother. But the event that convicted Theo and brought him to a sincere conversion was when the appointment before chemotherapy was to begin. A thoroughly confounded oncologist reversed his breast cancer diagnosis on Theo's wife. "I honestly don't know what happened." The doctor shook his head, looking at the computer printout in his hand. "I know what happened. God happened," Theo told the doctor. In the previous weeks, James prayed over each meal the two men shared, always including Theo's wife's medical situation. James said he knew many friends in the faith who were also praying individually and in groups for Theo's wife. A year passed since his wife's miraculous story and Theo's subsequent conversion. The last months have been more challenging for Theo's young faith. Old friends, old ways, and still living with his mother-in-law, all ganged up like bees in his bonnet sometimes. Bible studies with James almost always settled him. However, today he remained a little testy. Theo was not pleased about the work detail this day. His wife and mother-in-law would be fine watching their two children together at home, but he sorely wanted to be with them. To kill time, Theo was watching some videos he had saved on My Favorites, waiting for his wife to answer his awesome line message. James's wife was at home with their 3 young adult children, all prepared for the typhoon and doing whatever they could for their brother and son, James Jr. Jimmy, as he was called around the house and on the singing competition Taiwan Star Talent Search TV show, will compete Saturday, tomorrow, in the 4th round of the televised contest. In each episode of the show, they eliminate the weaker contestants. Jimmy has been doing well so far. After each show, he received the most audience votes on the show's call-in voting line. Jimmy also dominated the unofficial measuring sticks of public opinion on Facebook, Line, Instagram, YouTube, and the show's website. In polls, people listed Jimmy's best features as his good looks, his personality, his singing, his dancing, and his smile. Whenever someone criticized Jimmy in popular chat forums, hordes of fans rushed to defend him. All week on TV, contestants were spotlighted in ads, and Jimmy was featured, dancing hip-hop with a black fedora hat, a multicolored vest, and his signature smile. James Sr. is not James Jr.'s biological father. The family adopted Jimmy when he was 4.5 years old, and his sisters were 7 and 9. They visited an orphanage on the other side of northern Taiwan to help out one day and observe differences from the orphanage they regularly volunteered at closer to them in Taipei. Their family met and fell in love with Jimmy. James and his wife are both very light-skinned, and Jimmy is darker-skinned, an abandoned, half-white, half-aboriginal child. Jimmy, then called Jazz, had a gift of music and movement even then. He used it as a defense mechanism, a way to get accepted by strangers and the other orphans and staff at the orphanage. James and his wife and daughters spoke with him after his impromptu singing and dancing. They deeply enjoyed Jazz and attached to him, and the feeling was mutual. Poor Jazz's strong facade proved thin and crumbled away in an instant. All it took was one time James looked at his watch, and the young boy's big eyes filled with tears, and he jumped up from sitting cross-legged with them in the classroom public area. "Go ahead, you leave now, like everyone." He choked out the words. "It's time for you to leave me." Little Jimmy ran off to hide somewhere, and the Youngs slowly made their way into the car, where James's wife broke down in tears before James had his keys out, and then she was joined in a big cry by her daughters. Man of the house, bodyguard James's eyes were weepy too, but he kept control, and he asked them a question they never forgot. "Do you feel it? Do you feel you found a son, a brother?" They prayed in the car, and each of them, one by one, said the same thing, "Yes," and James did too. James's family was back inside and talking to the people in charge after a few composing minutes in the car. Many young children in Taiwan orphanages are not what one thinks of as orphans. Sometimes children are given a place to live there, but actually have families that come visit them in the orphanage. They cannot be adopted and may remain in the orphanage's care their whole childhood. It is a unique charitable form of institutionalized childcare. Fortunately, the directors of the orphanage were in the office for just one more hour before leaving to America for 2 weeks with 3 infants adopted by families in the States. They were waiting with piles of luggage and 3 sleeping babies for their ride to the airport, already late. The directors were happy to inform James and his wife that the young boy Jazz could be adopted. They explained regulations that the boy needed a transition period, but the directors agreed to sign a legal temporary writ of permission for Jazz to live at James Yang's home in Taipei, which could be renewed when they brought him back after the first week. The rest was history. Jimmy no longer sang and danced to get approval, but his new family was a musical bunch. So he began piano and violin lessons, besides English and other courses which he loved. His ability to perform without fear emerged again a few years later in public school talent shows popular in Taiwan, and with the congregation they gathered with as Christians. James thought through what he wanted to say as he finished a set of 100 regulation push-ups, breaking a sweat as he did. Then he emailed what he hoped appeared cheery typhoon messages to each of his family members. He did not use social media for this. He did not text message or Facebook message or line them because he did not want to interrupt their day, did not want them to feel obligated to engage with him immediately in conversation after receiving a social media notification. They had enough pressure on this day, the last day before Jimmy's next stage in the elimination competition show. He waited a few minutes before putting his laptop away in case they emailed back with some situation or thought they wanted to bounce off him. He was slightly curious that his wife's picture had not appeared in his email inbox. When they were apart, she almost always answered swiftly, maybe only with line stickers or emoticons, something corny or unexpectedly loving or spiritual. They have a strong marriage and they are still in love and still best friends. Their relationship is lush with loving and lighthearted inputs besides regular, deep, long conversations. She must be busy. James leaned back, practicing deep breathing in the matching wooden easy chair Theo was sitting in as Theo waited for his wife's line answer. James let himself get lost in a soup of gratitude-based thoughts, mixing it with prayer for his son, his wife, and his daughters, for tomorrow's show and today's concern with tomorrow. He and his wife talked together many times about Jimmy's shows. Of course, it was a very big deal, and Jimmy was a competitive young man who did his best, hoping to win. But James had been uneasy. The attention from society and the attention given by his family was entirely a modern phenomenon and not natural, possibly even a hazard. In James's eyes, it is not a lifestyle we were ultimately designed to live. However, he settled it in his mind, and he trusted his son's intentions to do his best in achieving a measure of fame and using that eventually as a Christian music entertainer, Jimmy explained, and then as some kind of minister doing God's work for God's purposes. When Jimmy began competing on the TV show, James let his misgivings all go and trusted in his Lord. God never let him down, not even one time in his life. Though the Christian music industry was littered with souls of well-intentioned shipwrecks, God would see James Jr. through to the other side if music entertainment was the Good Shepherd's will. James was glad the typhoon forced them all to rest before tomorrow. A good thing. Finally, one of his children must be answering, James thought as he reached for his pinging smartphone. It was the top half of his wife's face on the line call request, but it was not her number or account, and she looked stressed, unlike her. "This is strange," he said, turning to his partner, Theo, who was looking at his phone too, with just as baffled an expression on his face. "Do nothing you will be sorry for, Yang Junfan and Ping Xiaozhen." The camera view showed their wives bound at Theo's dining table. Their faces were wet with tears, but appeared relieved, perhaps trusting their husbands would rescue them. Whoever held the camera panned outward from the close-up, so they saw, besides their wives, Theo's mother-in-law was there too. All their forearms were duct-taped to the top of the dining table the women were all seated behind. Shiny garden shears were next to Theo's mother-in-law's hands. The two men's hearts sank in silent despair, understanding the threat. Two masked men were there, one holding the smartphone. He made a brief appearance, reaching out with a large butcher knife towards James's wife's face, and then slamming the blade tip into the heavy teak surface where a twin mark was already visible. As the knife swung and wobbled in its new position, stuck in the table, the masked cameraman spelled out the expected demand. "You will do exactly what we say, or they will die horribly, slowly, each of them, the children too." "All right, but," James began. "Shut up!" the man barked with such force the camera shook. The other man next to Theo's mother-in-law picked up the garden shears and her pinky finger hanging in the shears in one motion, drawing a trickle of blood. He was giggling like a disturbed person. "No, not this time," the man holding the smartphone ordered the other man. Then, to the husbands, "That was your only warning. We will start cutting off fingers if you try anything, if you say anything to anyone. We have hacked your laptops and phones. We will know if you try something, and you will be very sorry." He shouted this warning into the room, causing the women's faces to distort as they tried to cry with their huffing mouths taped shut. The two men followed instructions, getting the armored stretch van they always drive from the motor pool. They begged off the paperwork. "When we get back, okay?" Despite the raging typhoon, they swiftly made their way, avoiding fallen signs and tree branches on the road to the designated meeting place using Google Map, arriving at a potholed parking lot outside a large truck repair shop. 3 double-sized rolled-down steel doors protected the 3 front repair bays. 2 tow trucks were parked close together on the shop's more sheltered east side. As they arrived, typhoon winds abated and were replaced with sky-blackening tons of roaring rain. There were 4 men in denim and t-shirts visible through transparent throwaway rain ponchos working in front of a big Jeep. They motioned the van towards several large open wood crates near the Jeep. Theo parked as told, with the driver's side facing the brunt of wild winds between the crates and the street. Any limited typhoon street traffic could not see what they were doing. With no wasted motions, these 4 and another taller, muscular man dressed in black under his rain poncho all got to work on the van. Before the van arrived, they already had some crates apart and began constructing several structures that looked like large brackets or chassis of some sort. They moved to finish what they started without speaking, out in the dramatic torrential rain, as if they had some special skill of ignoring extreme weather. The taller man in black unbolted the 2 middle seats from the van and unceremoniously dumped the oversized swivel bucket seats out in the muddy parking lot. The other men wrestled them to the rear of the van, out of the way. 2 of the 4 from the Jeep, also from the stolen city construction truck, rolled nearer a mechanic's portable crane, the kind used to install and remove car engines on a base with larger rubber wheels for easy moving. The other 2 outside picked up and carried inside a welded rectangular aluminum frame. One of them quickly bolted it to the bed of the van with a portable air compressor drill. He secured it next to the front seats from the left wall to the right side. On top of that, they put a second, thinner chassis with a devised fulcrum in the middle for tipping, set up with a channeled column of ball bearings. Then they bolted a black-handled bent pry bar with a bottom point at the base along the van's left side. It looked like a knee-high metal sculpture of a check mark. Its purpose as a lever became apparent when they hoisted a large torpedo-shaped object onto the just-installed ball-bearing strip and heaved it all the way left. It looked like a torpedo, but it was an underwater vehicle for divers and military missions, a diver propulsion vehicle. The van lowered a touch when the DPV's full weight pressed onto the assembled dual chassis. James and Theo did not see any of this because the tall man in black gave them 2 cloth bags in the first seconds of this rendezvous. He handed them over the front seats, eyebrows furrowed up in one big scowl, saying only, "Give me your cell phones and then cover your heads with these bags. The less you see, the better for you. Do it now or someone will lose a finger." Theo obeyed without a word, with no delay. James pinched his phone between thumb and finger and held fast. "I'm going to need that back," James said. The man in black yanked, but could not pull the phone away, or even move James's forearm until James let go. He turned to comply, missing the man in black's twitching head and shoulders mask of triggered malice. Sanbao's hooded security detail jumped when the firing air hammer bolted down a second pre-constructed chassis extending from just behind the DPV to the foot of the right rear bench seat. On top of this chassis center was a frisbee-sized flat plastic circle, a heavy-duty Lazy Susan. They bolted another smaller swivel lever at the side, touching a rotatable center post under the white plastic circle. Pouring rain streamed from the men's hair, their ears, their chins, their ungloved fingers, and their rain ponchos. Then, without warning, the rain stopped and reverted to screaming, powerful wind that rocked the van and pushed the men around as they worked, even though the van's open side door faced away from the storm. Just like this morning at Fisherman's Wharf installing the ramp, they worked steadily, carefully, without talking. The men laid a slightly smaller front-to-back rectangular aluminum chassis on top of strengthened woven straps laid over the first chassis. The smaller chassis had welded supports vertically and horizontally, especially over the plastic Lazy Susan disc spot, and was heavier and sturdier than the other frame. Raised higher handles with motorcycle handlebar grips on the ends protruded from the rear of the apparatus. Then they used the same portable crane they hoisted the DPV with to fit in place a pair of 2-meter-long oxygen tanks on that smaller chassis. Then came another chassis of more intricate construction on top of the oxygen tanks. With 8 long, heavy stainless steel fitted clamps, they locked matching, stubby, protruding, rubber-coated handles together. Indentations cut into the bottom frame lined up so the top chassis was well secured onto the lower second chassis, gripping the oxygen tanks between them. Only the thick woven straps were left loose, unattached. After tightening everything just so, they carefully laid out on top what looked to be an unzipped, clear, oversized, thick sleeping bag. The heavy sealing zipper line was a hand width further inside than on a normal sleeping bag. There was a 1 coin-sized hole in the bag, ringed with clamped steel and woven rubberized cloth. This hole was at the end of the bag opposite the torpedo-shaped DPV. A tube was already woven sealed into place through that hole, with a short length of the tube inside the bag and a longer length going outside the bag. 2 of the men carefully unzipped the bag. They gently installed and secured the last chassis layer on top of and inside the clear bag, a padded stretcher. One man hooked up hoses from the 2 tanks to a single regulator that was rigged to feed 3 airlines. He quickly connected 3 full-face dive masks, 1 black, 1 blue, and 1 red. The black mask had the longest breathing tube. The red mask had the shortest one, and that now sat inside the clear bag at the end, closest to the van's rear seat. These air tubes resembled strong rubberized woven rope, and the couplers looked more like heavy-duty mountain climbing rigging than diving equipment. Outside, the others were wrapping up. They loaded the disassembled crane and odd pieces and tools back into 1 crate and closed it up, ignoring the other empty crate pieces. As the man finished with the diver's mask, breathing lines, and hopped down, another man reached over the 4-layered chassis they just constructed and placed a zipped-up bag on the van floor. The last man reached in twice to drop weighted dive belts, one much heavier than the other. The Typhoon sounded like it was rising to full strength, screaming and roaring all around them, shaking both vehicles, blowing everything away that could be blown away as they finished. James and Theo heard doors shutting. The powerful Jeep engine turned over and revved. After the Jeep left, screaming wind sounds were more obvious, caterwauling as only a Typhoon can. But for the 2 blindfolded men in the front seats, Super Typhoon Noru's cacophony was worse, proclaiming, "I am the king of beasts," and coinciding with their own personal nightmare. The van's side door slammed shut. "I'm taking off your bags. Don't try anything." The man pulled the bags off their heads. The warm air they were breathing inside the cloth bag switched to cold, air-conditioned van air with some new sense of oil and metal and a lingering sour sweat smell. Though gales and gusts were fearsome on the way there were signs Noru was still rising in force, especially just then. The concussive power was unbelievable. It changed the air pressure inside the van. An empty, heavy crate rolled away like cardboard, and their van rocked like it might roll away as well. "Get going. Drive on the Zhoumei Expressway to Danshui." He pointed up to the elevated expressway which shadowed above them, obviously not blocking any of the storm's rising fury. Despite the early hour, it was dark outside. Nauru's attacks alternated between torrential rain and wind. Now each massive gale-force blast shocked the senses. Brawny but helpless James hardly recognized this spot without the usual giant winking ribbon of brake lights, a red firefly river most evenings, vehicles barely moving far into the traffic jam distance. Today there were only a few brave cars out. Half of them were taxis in the already fierce squall, which was unbelievably still peaking stronger. On side streets below, powerful wind gusts made wild whitecaps fly about on street runoff water. James was amazed, as always, how during typhoons there was traffic at all. Haven't they seen the news reports where cars and trucks get overturned and blown down the road? The viral YouTube video last year showing a compact car carried up and disappeared in a typhoon twister from the east coast of Taiwan? Every typhoon, especially super-winded super typhoons, can make any piece of wood, metal, plastic, or glass a shooting lethal weapon. These drivers aren't thinking straight, James sighed, knowing there would be preventable casualties today. Only a fool or someone with a death wish would venture out in this unearthly weather terror. Where are we going? What are we doing? James asked in as flat a voice as he could. As an answer, the man merely picked up one phone and then looked at them with psychopathic bulging eyes. Everyone will be fine if you cooperate and shut up. And next time I have to tell you, there will be a punishment. 10 minutes later, 30 minutes into their journey, Theo blurted out, "You can't get away with whatever you think you are doing." The man in black turned on all three phones without looking up at the other men. He put the driver's home and everyone's smartphone on a video conference call. Then he passed them their phones and said, "Wait." Into his phone, he simply said, "The driver, Mr. Ping, isn't cooperating." The person on the other end listened. Without a word, he pointed the smartphone towards Theo's mother-in-law. His accomplice picked up the garden shears off the table. With insane calmness, he wrenched her left pinky finger halfway off in two strained but controlled squeezes of the shears. They heard no sound above the storm sounds in the van because the women's mouths were duct-taped, though the three women's cheeks were puffing out and in, longer out than in, silently screaming. Terrorized eyes and distorted faces around the table said more than enough. The ski-masked pair, both wearing surgical gloves, never spoke the whole time. That masked man holding the camera ended the transmission, cutting the view of Theo's mother-in-law's half-on, half-off finger steadily pulsing blood onto the table. The man in black held his hand out for them to give back their phones. "There are 29 and a half more fingers at that table and 2 sleeping children in the bedroom. We will cut as much as you make us. When our prize is in the van, I will let you talk with your wives, I promise. We only need to meet with President Wang." Once they had Wang Sanbao aboard and left the hotel parking lot, they turned right, taking a longer way around. If they turned left, their destination was so close it was within sight. But they needed a few minutes to get everything ready. The wind was at their back, turning from the hotel, so there was a brief lessened sense of the storm's strength. When they turned left, super typhoon winds immediately rocked the van, 20 zombies hammering broadside at once. They turned again after 100 meters and headed directly into the full smashing fury of the typhoon. The storm gale pushed the nose of the armored van down as they slowly rolled ahead on the straight road with densely planted walls of frenzied light green trees on both sides of the street. They drove unhurriedly in the opposite direction the security detail assumed they would, not towards Taipei, but heading toward the seawall, only a few hundred meters away. "We are all going for a swim, that's all." The man in black's voice was forced, revealing Theo and James were not the only ones afraid. "If you try to stop us, We will kill your families. First the women, then everyone in your families, the president's family too. He was talking and looking out at the storm, speaking less loudly as they approached nearer. They were mesmerized by spray from pounding waves dissipating. It shot over the road at incredible speeds. The surf froth flew upward and then instantly dispersed horizontally in a magic trick, which left flashing images of disappearing soccer field-sized flying carpets. Then from nowhere, the wind lifted, and they seemed to enter a waterfall. Impossibly heavy rain blinded the front windshield. Wipers swiping full speed had no effect. The rain on the roof of the van became thunderous. It sounded more like rocks than rain. The seas should bring you in safe enough, he forced himself to say louder. Theo tried to remember if, in the parking lot, he and James saw the other men's faces before their own heads were covered. He was turning this over in his mind, but unable to concentrate while bounce driving slowly through what felt like a tornado of water. James knew this man in black would kill him before he had a chance to swim. Before Theo and James covered their heads with the bags, all 5 men brazenly showed their faces to the security detail. They can't let us live. James was silently praying and thinking, calm beyond normal understanding. The girl connected the oxygen apparatus to her blue full-face breathing mask. It had full communication capabilities too, unlike her comrades. She slipped wireless earbuds in for her and Wang Sanbao, unseen by the man in black. She checked the pressure on Wang Sanbao's air and also checked to see if the old man was conscious. His eyes were half open, but he was out of it. She could hear him, but she would not speak to him unless he started panicking. Now that the girl was finished with her preparations on Wang Sanbao and had hopped out to prepare the ramp, the bodyguard said loudly but calmly, "Let us talk to our wives." "First, back the van up all the way to the end of the road." Veins bulged on the man's neck and forehead as he yelled. The kidnapper warned the men in front, "No tricks," and then handed over the turned-on phones to both men. Theo saw the 3 women at the table. Blood was still seeping from Theo's mother-in-law's finger, though less, because someone tied a shoelace at the base of the finger. She moved her face in twitching circles and quietly trembled, her mouth tightly bound. "Ma," Theo choked on the words of apology. "I'm so sorry. Thank you for everything." The van's side door flew open and the girl jumped in. She put on neoprene dive gloves, placed a second pair on the van floor in front of her nervous partner, and began busily making her final preparations. "My dearest wife, hi, baby." Theo began speaking in a more tender voice. He was stumbling over what to say because she could not answer his words and because he was trembling. "We are fine so far, Brenda. They said they will release us. I'm not supposed to say how, but we are cooperating, so there's no reason for them to hurt you there." He heard Brenda's muffled, plaintive cry humming. "We can't speak long, dearest wife. I love you, Brenda. You know that, but I have to tell you, I always loved you. I want to see you and be with you forever. And that means the next life. It's wonderful. We have eternal life in Jesus." The man in black impatiently growled, "Hurry, 10 seconds more." Theo's expression changed and he said, "Make sure our children always know God, sweetheart. Goodbye." One gloved hand pounded on the seat back and he shouted, "Turn it off." Theo turned off the phone and reflexively pocketed it. James' screen was still on, and he looked at his wife and smiled. She could not speak, but he recognized her brave smile from behind the duct tape for her familiar smile lines around her eyes. Her eyes were pools of sparkling tears, but she bravely faced him and turned her head and neck in the expression of deep love that he recognized. His voice cracked with emotion at first, but then he gained control and spoke steadily without a break. Every word was touching and gripped the others in the van, so they couldn't help listening intently. The man in black was getting agitated. He looked sideways at the girl. "He's still on the phone? You know everything's recorded," she said into her mask, loud enough for him to hear. "Let them be. It doesn't matter." From the bag at her feet, she picked up a clear, wide band of flexible plastic. She fit it over her entire head so that her combination face mask and mouthpiece was slightly uncomfortable. It was so tight, but would keep everything in place in the turbulent water. She offered a twin of the plastic now covering her face to her comrade, who only sneered at her weakness. Not for the first time, the girl named Coco doubted the wisdom of choosing him for this mission. She pointed to a place on the floor next to his dive gloves and put the plastic band down at his feet. The van was rocking and shuddering in the gusting, ultra-loud gale force winds. She forced herself to ignore them. She climbed in front of Sanbao's feet to the futuristic-looking diver propulsion vehicle where she powered on the DPV, along with a switch that overrode the DPV controls. They earlier installed the overriding controls into the chassis holding the stretcher Wang Sanbao was lying on. "Systems go." She turned to the next task, fixing herself in place. She noticed her partner had already put on his simple chassis harness straps over his clothes before they reached the hotel. She put hers on now quickly and tightened the center straps at her waist with a tug. Then she connected her harness to the stretcher chassis and cinched it tight, leashing her about a meter away from the steering bar with the overridden controls built in. Earlier, the man in black told her he would wait until the last minute to attach his harness to the stretcher chassis. She wanted to ask him if he was sure that was a good idea, but he was known for severe reactions to corrections or even suggestions. Next, emergency coiled cable lines, 4 meters for him, same as his air tube, and 2 meters for her. Their last safety backup connection if they had problems. She wrapped over her wrist a customized metal-hooked Velcro cuff with a steel ring sewn into it. They already secured the coiled cable to her side of the stretcher chassis with a mountain climbing carabiner. Her end of the cable had another mountain climbing carabiner similar to some keychains, and she plunked the Velcro cuff ring into it and yanked it to make sure it was on good. She held out another Velcro cuff to her partner. He just held out his left arm, keeping his eyes on the men in front. She put on his cuff and held out his cable with the carabiner shackle to attach to the ring on the cuff, but he rebuffed her. "Not yet." She held it up for him to see it in her hand and then lowered it to the floor of the van where it recoiled, snapping back next to his side of the chassis. She made sure the cables between the DPV, their underwater sled, and the stretcher chassis were also secured. Everything was right. Only then did she pull the heavy dive belt around her waist and push the other one over, bumping the man in black's foot. She started double-checking everything and mentally reciting her next crucial tasks while there was still time. The whistling and howling sounded even louder, and she had a twinge of fright, imagining what she would do if the armored van was picked up and tossed backwards into the deep port waters. James continued with a most caring monologue to his wife. "Dear Lao Po, my jewel, my Ruth, you know how much I love you, honey. I remember all our times together since we first met. Each year, each month has been better and better. You are the best helper, best friend, best wife anyone could ever imagine. I want to thank you and bless you." His words aggravated the kidnapper. "Finish! Now!" James continued as if he heard nothing. "We must keep the faith so we can be together again with Jesus in the kingdom to come." The man in the back lurched forward for the phone. "That's all. Give me the phone." James defied him and put the phone on the front dash above the glove compartment. He leaned forward in his chair and kept talking, ignoring the upset thug. The man growled at Theo, "Put it in neutral and floor it." When the engine was whining at high RPMs, he told Theo, Keep the gas on, and when I tell you, put it in drive." The girl was alarmed to see her partner had no seatbelt on. He was coming out of his seat. She noticed his diver's mask was still on top of his head, and he was pointing a .38 caliber Black Star Chinese revolver. She shouted out without thinking, "No! Let them swim!" Nothing else changed in the van, yet she felt her contrary words transformed the atmosphere completely. The gun was not pointed at her, not yet, but every part of her sensed danger now pointed at her. Though he said nothing, she knew from the way he looked at her, he would put one of the 6 bullets in her if she said another word. She reluctantly turned away. This was the most dangerous man she had ever known in her life. She put her gloved left hand on her face mask, and with her right hand, she grasped onto the buckled seatbelt. Her right foot was raised up on the edge of the stretcher, her left raised up on the edge of the seat. She turned her head to look out at the black and white utter wildness of the early afternoon typhoon in full force. Winds rocked the van and screamed in competing loudness with the high RPMs of the van's engine, both shaking and vibrating the van frighteningly. She felt a pang of regret for not kissing her cross necklace, and then swallowed her own doubt that it meant anything at all. She was encouraged by the words she absorbed with great thirst from the bodyguard in the passenger seat, who might be about to die even before he gets out of this van. James continued speaking, more loudly to be heard or because he was inspired. "I have always loved you, and I always will." Here he briefly paused. "I love you so much, and I know you love me, and I'm proud of you. I trust you will do your best to keep our children on the right way. You are a great mother and sister to many. Tell Hannah and Esther I love them more. And tell James Jr. "Now, go!" Hunter bent over the DPV and snarled into Theo's ear. "I love him! And tell him tomorrow. Jayo! Jayo, Jimmy!" The last words James said as the van slammed onto and over the ramp are cried, looking up, "Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior, have mercy on us." From his already frontward position, the gunman leaned forward more. The moment the van hit the ramp, the killer's chin slammed down onto the DPV. His teeth loudly jarred and crunched together. For an instant, he almost lost his grip on the gun, but holding the gun was his entire focus. His chipped teeth only further focused him. His whole body bounced up near the roof of the van, left hand brushing it and back down, slamming the left elbow funny bone on nearly the same spot he broke his teeth. Still, he collected himself and shot the bodyguard in the center of his shoulders and then in the center of his head. He saw the surf approaching through the windshield and flew back to his seat. He was stumbling as he shot, firing directly at Theo's center mass through the seat and then shooting Theo in the head, seeing blood on the windshield over the steering wheel, all as he reached for his seat belt. He grabbed it practically the same instant the van collided with the sea, only 17 meters from the wall, but it was far enough, deep enough. No person heard the shots or the wailing of the van engine or the loud scrape as it crashed into and over the ramp into the churning, stormy sea. The aged surveillance camera on the watchtower, the only official witness, was all a blur in the blowing typhoon wind and rain. Sparks where the van struck the ramp spread out in 4 directions like a carpet of fireworks, and the gunshots fired into the bulletproof windshield looked like harmless flickers of distant stars. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the reading this time. Please leave a comment if you did. What did you think? Remember, sharing is caring, so please do tell a friend who would like to join us here. If you are enjoying the journey, I'd be so grateful if you would be a supporter and pick up a copy of Danshui President Plunge on Amazon and leave a review. Until next time, take care. I look forward to seeing you here again. See you then.